Welcome to Queerly a Podcast, where we attempt to do an episode weekly about different media depictions of women, mental health, and LGBTQ plus related topics. So anything within that umbrella in media, going from comic books to movies, shows, video games, things like that. Today we'll be going more into the video game side of things. I am one of your hosts, Jacqui. I'm doing a mini-sode, solo-sode, maybe not mini. We'll see how the length goes. And we're going to be kind of going into women and gaming, both kind of depiction and how it's changed over time, as well as the place of women and views of women within the community, backlash to changes, all of that kind of stuff. So for context, in terms of my opinions, thoughts, and views on this, I am a woman. I've been playing games since I was very young. I am Gen Z, so I grew up during the time when voice chat in online games or online multiplayer segments of games became more of a thing. And all that comes with that. So I played games like COD a lot. I played a lot of multiplayer. So I have experience on that end. So I guess we'll start with the change of views when it comes to women as gamers. Because, I mean, obviously, in kind of 90s, 80s, that stuff's been already talked about, seeing as now people who grew up then are main source of media and thought pieces and everything like that. But with 2000s, we saw kind of a rise in the amount of women who played games. I mean, we saw a rise in just the diversity of gamers, I feel like, because of both increased accessibility to these titles and consoles and everything, as well as just increased maybe awareness. I think that's the kindest word to give, of the fact that, different people exist in the world. But we also saw a lot of backlash and criticism of things. So, for example, being a female gamer in the 2000s, both early and late, I obviously had more experience in late 2000s, you'd never want to be on voice chat. And yeah, now today that's like a common thing just for anybody, just to avoid, slurs and shit. But especially then, being female, it didn't matter like what age you were either, which is kind of disgusting. But no matter what age you were, if it became known that you were female, you would begin getting things like, for example, like Xbox, like messages from random people, or you'd start getting sexual comments in voice chat. You would get derogatory terms. You'd get people talking you down immediately. Things like that. Luckily, I mean, voice chat in games is voice chat in games. There's always going to be that side of things, but I'd like to think that it has changed since then. Even in places such as VR chat, which I don't fully understand how exactly it works, and how there seem to be so many kind niches on it. At least from what I've seen on YouTube. But even there, you see some really nice, interactions between people. Like, that's all we need in this world. So, like, I'd like to think we've improved on that front. But, I mean, the perception as well of women playing video games during the 2000s, it was either, as, like, in terms of the player, it was either they were very ugly, kind of like the whole idea of like the fat guy behind a computer screen, but a woman who's ugly and probably also fat because it's the 2000s, or is like Megan Fox in the Transformers movies, where it's basically a guy. It's taking things that people usually think of as something a guy does or says or thinks, and then just adding like a hot body. So in Megan Fox's case, it was cars. And in the case of gamers, obviously it's games. And so it was more used as either making the woman into a punching bag or into a sexualized fantasy. And so that's also what you kind of saw in, well, less the punching bag, but you also saw that in the games. So I do agree with the idea that media kind of reflects the zeitgeist of the time it was made. I don't know if it really inspires action or change within that time, but I do think it definitely reflects the time. And so you saw things like characters who were considered badasses, but really were just over-sexualized female figures who typically, had a weapon but weren't, like, as powerful. Or if they were, it was still, like, they did stuff for guys just randomly for free and didn't care who they were. So in terms of the sexualization, thinking of characters such as Sylvanas in... Sylvanas? It's Sylvanas, right?
Wow.
In WoW, yeah. Yeah, Sylvanas. Her whole design, just boobs. That's about it. And, like, yeah, she has powers, but it's mostly just about looking at her art, and you know, dudes doing what dudes do to it. And so you have that, you have characters like Morgana in Dragon Age Origins, I want to say, is the game. That's actually the only one I've played of the Dragon Age. I tried Inquisition, but didn't get super into it. But, yeah, so you get characters like Morgana, who, while she may be like an interesting character, she doesn't really... She still has that whole situation going on. She still has, like, kind of the sexy outfit. She's powerful, but it's in service of the main character. I mean, that's... And I know that you could easily say, it's because she's a side character. That's what all side characters are. It's in service of the main character, especially if it's party-based. But with her, because you basically are the catalyst to her leaving her home, if I recall correctly. You're the one who basically gets her to leave her home and join you, and that's all. That's like the main crux of it. And of course, if I remember incorrectly, then that's just on me. But that is mainly what I remember. And I doubt it's her personality that first comes up in people's minds when they think of her. Or Morrigan! Oh, shit! What did I say? Morgana. Oh, shit. Morgana? No, Morgana is the character from... it's a character from a book I read in middle school called The Sight. It's a wolf. It's like an evil wolf. What the fuck am I on? Jesus. Morgana. So yeah, that's...
Morgan, you said it again.
Shit! Morgan! Alright. You know what? I'll keep that in. Morgan. That. Okay. We're gonna stop doing that so I don't call her the wrong name again. So you had characters like Morgan. You also had characters in Skyrim, for example. I mean, Bethesda's characters aren't always the most interesting. But, I mean, I'd say that a lot of the females in that game either are just kind of like most of the side characters and just like background fodder, like no one really gives a shit. Or they are still sexual. I mean, think of Ayla in The Companions. Like, why is she wearing like a boob window corset, like with fur? Like, I don't get it. She's like has the werewolf thing going on, but she's also basically a Viking. So would you not think that a Viking would have armor? And there are exceptions. There's like Serana. Serana's played by Laura Bailey. And she is very well written, I think. But then again, she's a DLC character, meaning that most of the DLC is surrounding her. She is the thing that starts the entire DC, basically, you finding her. So I don't... Yeah, it can count, but I don't really think that changes the other characters, like that I've mentioned. So we have those. Let's see if I can think of some others. Oh yeah, Delphine. She's alright. I mean, she's also not depicted as a character that's like romanceable or anything like that. She's not an option, meaning they don't need to make her like hot or like sexualized. But in Mass Effect, I love Mass Effect. I fucking love the games. But this effect's pretty obvious. The entire Asari race is a race of blue, like, aliens. Yeah, they have, like, squid tentacle back of the head thing, but it never moves. It still looks like hair. And they all look like women who are hot and have, like, moderate to large size boobs. And there are sexual scenes. I mean, they're not super sexual, but, like, you know, they get past it. They fit the rating. And certain outfits show off a lot more cleavage than it really shows off the shape of a man. Things like that. So it, as well written as the characters themselves are, they still fall into that trap. But I think that we started moving past that in the 2010s. And in 2010s, you also saw, like, that increase in female gamers. And obviously, there was backlash to that increase in female gamer population. You had people saying... I don't... Honestly, if you lived through that time and you were part of this community, I feel like I don't really need to give specific examples. I didn't really want to look at them, but you had people saying, like, they're pandering to women to try to get them into games. Like, they're basically the same thing as they say about, like, inclusion of minorities or queer characters. Like, they're pandering to them. They just want to... They're not, like, staying true to what it is. That's basically the core of what they're trying to actually get at. Basically... I shouldn't say that. Yeah, I'm not gonna say that, what I was thinking. But, the core, they're trying to protect what they feel should only be a boys' club. Any women who come in are a threat to the idea. So, you had things like, you had Gamergate, that whole thing. And, like, there are flaws in Anita Sarkeesian's, like, argument, things like that. But it also, there are points within it that are valid and that were still, that were dismissed as being equally as, stupid as some of the others. So, it makes me think of the Amber Heard trial, and the effects that I fear it will have on the Me Too movement, where you have something that, it doesn't really help a cause despite championing itself under that name. And I think Anita Sarkeesian had better intentions than Amber Heard, but I fear that it will have a negative effect on people's willingness to believe Me Too survivors. And that's already a big issue. Because, I mean, the whole thing of Me Too is it's happened to a lot of people, and they were too afraid to say it because no one would believe them. And so in Gamergate's context, it was a lot more of regression from wanting to include certain types of female characters, ones that were either not over-sexualized, not very conventionally attractive, ones that basically didn't serve a, for lack of a better term, horny male audience. Straight male audience. We gotta keep that in mind. But we still got some good characters, even in that. Though I think that the ones that we got, despite being really well written characters, kind of slid under the radar in terms of criticism because of them fitting within that mold. So you had characters like Ellie, who I've already talked about in The Last of Us. You had characters like Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn. You had characters like Elizabeth in BioShock. All of those, I think every single one of those was 2013. Although Horizon Zero Dawn may have been 2015. I could be mistaken. But that 2-year difference, I think, doesn't really change what was going on. So with Ellie, in Ellie's case, she was a kid, so that already changes the view that people have. I mean, she's 14 in the game, so people aren't going to be expecting sexualization of a 14-year-old, and they shouldn't. They're right in that case. So that's already off the table. And then in terms of the way she's written, and this isn't to say that this isn't realistic, the way she's written, and it's not to say that she isn't written very well. I mean, it's obvious if you've seen or listened to my previous episodes on The Last of Us that that's not the case. But she fits a mold that already existed, the kind of snarky tomboy teenager, who, from what I've heard, a lot of boys, when they are teenagers, find super cool and like want as their gamer girlfriend. That's what I've heard. But she fit under an archetype that already existed, that was already kind of accepted by that type of crowd, and within kind of games themselves. And so you have that, and then with characters like Aloy, you're playing mainly an RPG, and while there is overarching story, and Aloy does kind of have her own personality, because of the fact that it is so dependent on the role-playing aspect and how much the player contributes to the world and places themselves in Aloy's shoes, you're not going to have that same issue, because you see yourself as the character more or less to some degree. And so you're typically not going to over-sexualize yourself. If you do sexualize yourself, then it's not an issue, because it is you viewing yourself as that character. It's like if in Skyrim you created a female character and you were attracted to female characters and you dressed them up in, I don't know, one of the, I can't think of an armor. It's one of the armors that shows more, I guess. I can't think of a specific one. But you are still playing as that character. So you're either creating a character or you are putting yourself in the place of that character. It's not really seeing the character as a person of their own, who someone else is depicting as sexualized, if that makes sense. I think the best way to really try to explain what I'm trying to say is in contrast a character like Elizabeth in BioShock. So she's very much not a player insert character. She's a side character. Your main protagonist is Booker. She has a very strong and apparent personality. And so she does obviously fit into the archetype that already existed, kind of the naive Disney princess-esque young woman who is then exposed to the world by an older man. I don't mean that in a sexual sense. I mean that in a literal exposing to the world, seeing new things sense. And so she fit that. She did fit into the typical depictions of femininity in terms of her look, her physical look, what she wore, things like that. And so she wasn't really something that was out of the box or out of the accepted range of women at the time, if that makes sense. So they didn't really get much, if any, backlash, I would say. I will say that one depiction of a woman at that time, I think it was released 2013 as well, in David Cage's Beyond Two Souls, which, first of all, it has a lot of issues. David Cage, I'd like to speak with you sometimes. But among them is the lack of actual agency that they give Jodie, who is played by Elliot Page, though Jodie is female. So I'll just say she, for referring to the character. She is basically tossed between scenes where other people are dictating the circumstances she's under. So whether it be she is sent off to the CIA to train, she's sent off on a mission, she's manipulated to kill a democratically elected leader, she is sent off to try to stop a Navajo spirit, which that in itself is oh god. She doesn't have true agency within her own story, which at least the other characters do. And so I feel like there wasn't a lot of people talking about that, at least at the time. I think since a lot of people have seen the issues with that game, at the time, most of the criticism, though, was just how the story was presented in terms of its non-chronological layout. So you'd kind of go back and forth between different time periods within Jodie's life. But yeah, not much on Jodie herself as a character. And so that type of thing kind of continued for a while. Now, obviously, I haven't played all games from then. There probably were exceptions. I'm sure, especially in the indie world, there were plenty of exceptions. But those were kind of the main things, the huge games that reached the widest audiences. But as time went on, I think we've seen a difference. So to begin, on the positive note, we do see a difference in terms of how women are now depicted. I think we're seeing a lot more of female characters who can still be feminine without being feminine in a way that is specifically targeting a male gaze. So, for example, thinking of characters like Abby from The Last of Us Part 2, who I, again, have talked about in that respective episode. But her physical build is not one that is typically within an archetype that fits with the male gaze. She is extremely strongly built. She's actually based off of a professional CrossFit athlete, I suppose, if that's the right term. And she has a face that is more angular than the typical softer, rounder face that you see in those previous types of games. There was a lot of backlash to her, and more specifically, just her design. So when the leaks occurred, so during these leaks, for those who didn't know, there were multiple character designs, character models, as well as certain scenes that were leaked. And these scenes, that's a whole nother can of worms. But the design itself, there were a lot of Twitter threads and other platforms, but that was the main one of choice for these people, where either she was called a derogatory term for transgender people, or people said, "Oh, this isn't like why did they make her look like a man? This isn't realistic. Like everything like that. Women can't look like that." And this was for reference. This was 2020 when this game came out. So yeah, it's 7 years after the first game that it came out. We have progressed. There were fewer people saying these things, which thank God. But they are still here. And so with their presence also still here, we see characters like, again, in basically any FPS that that has a history. So like COD, I don't know if they've even made a new Battlefield in a while. But yeah, COD, or even, honestly, Assassin's Creed Valhalla does it too, where in terms of making a character badass, and one that's considered more acceptable in today's social climate, I guess, socio-political climate, they will just strip the character of femininity. So in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I tried to play, it's super boring. Don't do it. Eivor, the main character, you can choose either a female or male Eivor. They go back and forth on the pronunciation of it. But I had previously played Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where they have that same choice. It's different characters, they're actually siblings. But I really enjoyed the way that they're written slightly different. Their intonations are kind of different when they give the same lines. Their performances are a bit different. And they do feel like separate characters, and it's pretty cool. Cassandra, who is the main, the canon character, actually. She's the main protagonist if you choose the female route, and she's canon. Played by, I think it is Melissa Manhut. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She is Greek, so I am not. So I am not great at pronouncing those types of things. But she played Cassandra, and Cassandra, she was feminine. She was very much a woman. She wore both clothes that were more stereotypically men, but also ones that were more the female variant of such clothing or armor. She would, that might be, the only way I can think to say it is flirt in a more feminine way, or a more stereotypically feminine way. Because there are various romantic interests throughout the game. You can romance, you can romance as many of these characters as you want, basically. It's Greece. We're out here. Loving. But she had a good balance of that. I mean, she was also a Spartan warrior with some god powers. Like, that's cool as hell, dude. And so then I went into Valhalla, and I thought, oh, alright, I'll try out the female character. Cool-ass, badass Viking woman. I mean, that's my jam. And then I started playing, and the way that they did her was basically male Eivor and changed the face and slightly the voice. The voice is a little weird, I will say. It's one of those things where you can tell. Well, I don't want to say you can tell because I don't know what the actual voice actress sounds like. But it sounds like somebody struggling to keep their voice deeper for a performance. And that already, the deepening of one's voice, specifically to try and make the character seem more badass or more cool in the eyes of players, is playing into that idea that to be a strong character, and accepted as a strong character, without being able to sexualize the character, they need to be stripped of all femininity. So all of her outfits are essentially the exact same. I noticed very little difference when it came to the outfits between her and the male Eivor. Her lines, I don't want to like shit on the voice actress, because I don't know if it was her or the voice director or just higher ups or whatever. But the delivery of those lines were very flat, not much emotion. And I get it. Yeah, if you're a Viking, you might not show as much emotion, but you're also not, a Terminator. So it just felt weird. It felt like a huge step back, honestly. It felt like we were going back to those early or late 2000s shooters. And so that was very disappointing. I mean, if you can find plenty of footage of female Eivor and any comparisons between dialogue spoken, everything like that. Yeah, and with, actually a point with how they couldn't sexualize her, because of that point, they also gave her a much more angular, more typically male, featured face. I don't know if they would give that to a character, even if it's a main character, such as Cassandra. They didn't do this. I don't know if they'd give that type of feature to a main character that they found conventionally attractive to a male gaze, or one that they felt that they would be able to sexualize to some degree. So, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way. It really does. And, I mean, that whole game, to be honest, felt like a step back in all aspects. So, I don't know who's to blame, but I'm blaming the game. But I still have hope at this point. I think that characters are getting written much better. We're seeing a lot more care put into them. We're seeing a lot more acknowledgement of, as obvious as it should be, a lot more acknowledgement of the humanity of different people and their desire to be seen in media. And so, yeah, I have hope. In terms of in terms of women within gaming, I will say that we still have those people who are very much into the old ways of a more of a sausage club, with women really being there just for sexualization, or fulfilling a fantasy, things like that. But we're seeing a lot less of that, I'd say. They aren't as prevalent, nor maybe not as loud, but you don't hear them as much. They might just be as loud. But yeah. I will say that when it comes to development of games, there is still a long way to go. It's like film. There's still very little presence of female developers compared to male developers. There's still a lot of instances of sexual harassment in the workplace. There's still a lot of instances of unfair treatment based on sex. One example, I don't think I mentioned this already, is with Riot, who I don't know if it's recently at this point, I think it was like a year ago, was having some controversy, and I think it might have gotten to the point of lawsuits regarding sexual harassment. And it was a very prevalent issue. There are a lot of people affected by it. And so I think that, like Hollywood as an industry, it kind of needs some reworking. But we are seeing an increase in female developers. There's still not nearly as many as male developers, which is a shame and ridiculous. But again, I think we've on an optimistic note. I think we're progressing. And the same goes for the number of female characters who are being popped out. I mean, if you go to, there's a wiki page where you can see female protagonists. Actually, is it female protagonists or female characters? Just female characters in games. It is, in the words of one of my friends, depressingly short. Much like the list of queer characters in movies. But it is, the rate of growth is increasing. There's a lot of characters on there who you'll recognize from games probably within the last 5 to 7 years. And so I think that we're on a path where that list will grow much faster rate each year. So basically what I'm saying is I have hope for us. I have hope for gamers becoming more well-adjusted people. I have hope for the gaming industry to become less of a piece of shit. And I have hope for female characters in games to continue on a path of being able to be portrayed as actual humans, rather than things to be ogled at, or even just as men. So yeah, that's my main argument. thoughts, ideas. Yeah. I guess this is the end of the mini-sode. I hope my ramble was coherent and at least enjoyable. Hopefully even entertaining or informative. Either or, really. And yeah, so you can follow us on Twitter at queerly_podcast. You can also get any new episodes from either our RSS link, which is just /queerly, or you can find us on platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, all those good ones. And then you can also suggest different topics as well as pieces of media just to review. You can give us comments, questions, anything like that. on our website, which is www.queerlyapodcast.com. And we will be uploading likely within the next few days a more typical episode, one with both Liz and I. It was normally my co-host. Just scheduling issues, as you know, as life often gives you. But we hope to see you soon, and who knows, maybe I'll upload another mini-sode while we're in the interim, if I get struck with something I want to talk about. But yeah, I hope everyone stays safe, stays healthy, and we will see you next time.